Hello everyone, my name is Shane McElroy and you're all very welcome to this evening's webinar where we will be bringing you updates on Tirlán's weather support package from our CEO designate Sean Malloy, as well as technical information on extending fodder and feeding for milk and fertility. Just to note, this webinar this evening will be recorded and available on our YouTube channel afterwards, and we'd encourage your participation in the event this evening by posing your questions to our speakers via the Q&A tab on Zoom on your phone or on your computer. We'll do our best to address these questions during the webinar. But now, without further ado, I'll hand over to Tirlán Chairperson John Murphy for our opening address. Thank you.
Great, thanks Shane, and good evening everybody, and thank you for joining our webinar. This is our second, I think, weather crisis webinar in the past month, and hopefully we won't have to attend another one of these for a very long time. I suppose as farmers at this stage, look, we're all our wits' end. Here we are in full winter mode as we approach mid-April. We're now well into the 7th month of winter. And it's been a really long, expensive winter. The rainfall is relentless. And this is causing huge issues on farms, causing huge hardships, it's causing huge stress. And, at this stage, we know we're all farmers, that we're physically tired, we're financially stretched. We have higher costs than normal, way higher costs than normal, and milk supply, on all our farms has really fallen off a cliff over the last few weeks, and we see that in the business as well. And of course, we're also a huge mental stress out there at the moment. So, at Tirlán, we're a farm family-owned co-op, and, and it's really important to us as a co-op. Co-ops are here for the benefit of our members, to work together for the benefit of all. So it's important now at this juncture that the co-op steps up, and supports our farmers as best we possibly can. And the board met last Monday morning in the teams of bad weather and rain pelting off the window, and we approved a €30 million package for our members. We really pushed ourselves to do the very best we can. This is outside normal milk prices and normal monthly fixing our price. This is something special, something different to help out our farmers, because we know at this stage that that's pivotal. So Sean, we'll go into that now in more detail momentarily. But also, I'd ask farmers, to reach out, because I know there's huge financial stress on farms. I know there are people in trouble with credit limits and payments, and, we're all in the same boat. So it's important, you reach out to your agri team, talk to them, we're here to help. We haven't been going overly hard on collecting money over the last couple of months. We know exactly what the position is. And that's, again, the benefit of being a co-op. So I encourage farmers to get in touch, talk to your manager. Don't worry if you feel you're up to the limit, you can't get that load of meal, get that load of meal. We're here to help. And it's important even just talk to our staff, to have a chat, or talk to your neighbours. This is the time to definitely stick together. And I'm hearing some really nice stories over the last couple of weeks where farmers are treating other farmers very fairly as regards to fodder, whether it's silage or straw, or just ask, please replace it next fall or next autumn, without any money. But unfortunately, we're hearing other stories where there's price gouging going on. That's not the co-op way. And I'd ask people, please, be fair to your fellow farmer. Dig each other out in this time of crisis. I suppose it's not just a grain or a dairy issue. Like the grain guys, they're having a horrid time. We've had almost no winter corn sowed last winter. This year, there's absolutely zero spring corn sowed. Like we're getting into the middle of April now, so we are getting near crisis point. So look, we're really concerned about that, and I can assure you, we will assist grain guys along the year also. I was talking to a couple of grain farmers today after the launch of our Slaney River project, and they said our total focus now is getting the crops in, and hopefully we'll get an opportunity over the next couple of weeks. It seems to be a little bit of a glimmer of hope on the front now, on the weather front. So hopefully we can get that done. So look, at this stage, just hand you over to Sean. Maybe Sean, you can take us through the detail of the support package.
Thank you, Chairman, and good evening, folks. Shane, there might be a slide there you can pull up if you would. Look, thank you to everybody who has joined this call this evening. I think our Chairman has caught the sentiment of why we're doing this very well. Our board met, as the Chairman set out, on last Monday in order to have a focus session to see what support the organisation can provide to our farmer members at this point in time. And just on the following slide that Shane is going to come to here, we've set out a summary of the various different elements of our support package. As our chairman has set out, in total, this package accumulates to a cash flow support on farms of some 30 million for our dairy farmers. And essentially, there are 5 elements to the package that we announced on Monday last. The first element is the extension of our unconditional bonuses into March. Ordinarily, our unconditional bonuses would end at the end of February. The February bonus would be 3 cents per litre. And the board have agreed that now will be extended into March. And indeed, conscious that all farmers are going through this challenge, it is also agreed that the unconditional payment will be paid to all milk suppliers. So whether you're in contract under liquid milk or indeed some fixed milk price elements, all suppliers will have the unconditional bonus paid onto their milk price. In addition to that, in order to address the very significant challenge of cash flow on farms, it's been a really long winter. In fact, it started in the early autumn months, and it's been a very difficult winter in terms of feeding animals with very low milk production. In that context, we have announced the development of an advance payment scheme, whereby on a voluntary basis for whatever farmer wants this in our dairy farmers, you will qualify for a 5 cents per litre payment based on your March volume. So whatever volume of milk you supplied on March, you have the opportunity to get 5 cents per litre of an advance payment on that milk, and then that can be paid back during the peak months of 2025. So that will be essentially providing funds. There will be no interest charged on those monies to our farmers, but hopefully for those who require it, it will be of significance in terms of trying to meet some of the cost on your farms during the past months. In addition to that, you will understand that some 2 years back, we introduced the approach to payment for milk on a twice monthly basis, as opposed to the traditional once per month. I think that's proving to be very beneficial to farmers in recent months because it helps the cash flow, having monies coming in twice per month. Up to now, that was 50% during the early and 50% during the second payment in each month. For next month, so effectively April milk paid for in May, we're going to increase the first increment from 50 to 60%, again, to try and get more money into our farmers early in the month for the month of May. Some 3 weeks back, you will note at this stage, we identified the problem emerging on a good number of our farms with respect to feed running short. So at that juncture, in order to help farmers secure more feed on farms, we introduced a 30 euros per tonne feed rebate, and it was on a defined volume for a couple of weeks at that juncture. We extended that at the end of the 2 weeks, and we decided on Monday last, given the continuation of the poor weather, that we are going to extend that 30 euros per tonne feed rebate scheme up to the end of April. So it gives farmers the opportunity to secure feed at a reduced price up to that point in time. And then finally, in terms of the overall package, we have ordinarily run a credit scheme for fertilizer purchases, but in the ordinary course of events would run to the end of March. In fact, this year, very little fertilizer has gone out, even less has gone out onto pasture. So we've taken a decision to extend the credit-free option on fertilizer to the end of May, again, giving farmers the opportunity, when the weather improves, to acquire that fertilizer and to get it out on pasture, and to not have to incur the cost of it for a number of months, again, on a credit-free basis. So all told, this package, as I said, is worth about 30 million in terms of supports to our farmers. And as our chairman pointed out, we are very conscious of the challenge with respect to other members, particularly our tillage farmers and indeed some of our beef suppliers. And we're actively trying to identify mechanics that will help support our farmers in those 2 arenas either. And that's something that we're currently working on. And I suppose finally, just to echo the chairman's comments there, our team are available on an ongoing basis to provide advice and guidance. This technical webinar is one such feature, but on an ongoing basis to there. And I would ask you, if you're challenged or in any difficulty at all, please reach out. And very much in the spirit of our co-op, as per our chairman's comments, we will be there to help and assist as best we can during this difficult period. So with that, Shane, I'll hand it back to yourself.
Thanks very much, Sean, and just to recognise the contributions there from John at the start, and thanks for your update on the number of support measures there, Sean. Just to note, guys, that Sean and John will both be staying on throughout the webinar this evening, and will be welcome any questions or comments that you have through the Q&A function on Zoom. So just to bring to our technical component of the webinar this evening, we'll shortly hear from Elaine Brady, a ruminant nutritionist, on feeding for milk and fertility as we come into the breeding season quite soon. It's hard to believe, given that cows are still not out in the fields in many cases. So before that, Brian Hart will take us through the options for extending out fodder supplies while making sure the cow's nutritional needs are being met. So what I would ask just guys for tonight's interactive session, let's make it as interactive as possible. Put your questions into the Q&A section on the topics that you're hearing, and we'll put those to the speakers later on. And if you're happy to, also include your name and county, and it'll give us an idea of where you're coming from across the country. So Brian, over to you.
Thank you very much, Shane. So exactly what Shane said, I'm just going to go through a number of different solutions that we're seeing on farm, but more so solutions that are working quite well at the moment. The first, and it may seem like a very obvious one, and I know a lot of people, it's not an option at the moment, but where we are seeing grass at any quantity being got into a diet, whether it's an hour and a half, 2 hours of grazing, it's having a massive benefit to milk supply, milk protein, and even body condition that we're seeing on farm. And admittedly, look, it's not an option on so many farms, and even on some farms, a lot of the dry ground has been grazed. So for those places that are possibly then looking at silage stocks running tight, the next option will be looking to purchase silage, or as say our chairman said, the number of agreements are happening between farms with swapping of silage as we speak. What we're seeing there at the moment is that silage is available throughout our region. Our team are actually linking sellers and buyers, and also Teagasc have very successfully launched a fodder register, and they're linking people that have fodder available with people that are looking for it. But admittedly, purchasing silage this time of the year, the quality can vary, and we have seen in some instances where fodder has been purchased and it has negatively impacted on milk because they're after coming, their own silage would have been better. So as we go on to the next slide, we begin to kind of explore more options on the next slide. So the most likely one, and probably the most time efficient and labor efficient one that we're seeing there now, is just concentrate. It's very easy to push the button in the parlor, and it doesn't require a great deal of extra work. And we're very conscious of that at the minute, because the labor requirement on farms at the minute is absolutely massive. Just to give you some figures around that, feeding 1 extra kilo of concentrate will save approximately 4 to 5 kilos of fresh silage. So for example, feeding 2 kilos per cow to a 100 cow herd, this is going to save around 1 bale per day. And where bales are scarce, and hopefully with weather now improving, we want to just stretch out what we do have. Every little bale will make a difference. Probably the maximum feeding rate for your average farm there is around 8 to 9 kilos split in 2 feeds per day. This will vary from farms. We do see some farms that struggle, depending on the breed of cow they have and depending on the milking parlour and milking system they have, they can struggle to get up to even 8 kilos, and we do see other people that are able to get up to 9, no problem. So it's very individual. But probably in the last, say, fortnight or so since we had our last webinar, we're after seeing probably more people needing to spare more silage, and there's only a limit to what can be fed in the parlour. So that's when we start to look at what straights are available as a kind of a midday feed, or even through a TMR for people with diet feeders. Probably our preference here, or the preference we're seeing, or what we're seeing is working quite well out on farm from a performance and a price point of view, is soya hulls. It's very palatable, it's high in energy, and it's a performance feed. So again, it's getting results back in the bulk tank again, you know. So as we go on to the next slide there again, we'll begin to look at just some of the other queries that would come into us, and some of the other options that are working quite successfully out on farm as well. We do see a lot of beet available around the region, and a lot of people have been offered it to extend, say, fodder and to just increase the energy density of the diet. Beet is an excellent feed, very high in energy, but there is certain risks around it as well. Beet needs to be introduced slowly. It can't be just fed very rapidly, and you do, to get to a decent level of beet feeding, say 12 to 15 kilograms per cow per day, that'll take the best part of a week, if not 10 days, to get to that type of level. And that's the kind of level you need to be at to displace a decent level of silage. So again, it's for some people very close to grass, mightn't be overly suitable. And again, because it's so high in energy and it can lead to digestive upsets if fed too much, that combined with wet grass can lead to some digestive upsets. So it's just a bit of a health warning. If you are looking at beet, there is a couple of things you do need to look out for there as well. In previous years, where silage would have been scarce, straw would have been right at the top of our list and is excellent at, say, stretching out silage. But look, this year, the availability, let alone quality, are both issues. Straw is a low in energy feed, and it will need to be balanced for protein and minerals. But that's quite easily done with, say, a concentrate or a straight or so on and so forth. You know, so for those people that do have access to straw, it is an excellent option. And as well as that, when you're kind of going to feeding, say, maybe 6 kilos in the parlour and 3 to 4 kilos of soy hulls as a midday feed, you know, that physical gut fill is very, very important to, you know, just to fill up the room and to keep proper room and function going. And that's what straw is providing quite well, and even bale silage in those instances. So as we just go on to my final slide there, what we kind of want to do is just, we have all the solutions and good solutions out there, but there's a couple of just really practical points that do come up that probably slip underneath our radar at times there. When feeding high levels of concentrate, access to water is absolutely critical, and it's come up numerous times over the last fortnight. As concentrate levels have been increased, cows drink a hell of a lot more, and if there's one way of reducing milk volumes quickly, it is reducing access to water. So just make sure that you're not seeing cows queuing up waiting for water, and if you are, it would be advisable to try and address that as quick as possible. We will always aim to maintain forage as 50% of the overall dry matter intake. So what does this look like in a cow's diet? That's up against, say, 9-10 kilos fresh weight of concentrate being fed. That'll roughly work out at around 50% of a constant 50% concentrate, 50% forage in the diet there. So again, like we said in the last slide, provide long fiber, specifically where, say, you're feeding high levels of concentrate. And then just finally, for me, just wanted to give probably 3 or 4 very, very common diets that we're seeing there now at the minute, and probably where the limits of those diets are. The first one up in the top right-hand corner of the screen there is just your typical parlour feeding. A farmer that mightn't have headroom, doesn't have time to do a midday feeding, so they're going to the max of the 8.5 kilos of the concentrate. That's what the farmer, that's all that they can get into the cow, and they're feeding 42 kilos of silage fresh weight then. And that's coming all to what the cow, meeting the cow's requirements fairly well there, okay? But for, again, like I said, in the last fortnight, we're seeing a hell of a lot of people coming to us and saying, look, I need to feed more to save on more silage. So that's where you're seeing it in that middle slide there of the silage concentrate in the soy hulls. And all we're doing there is just dropping the parlour feeding back to 6.5 kilos when we're introducing 4 kilos of soy hulls as a midday feed. And again, we're able to cut our silage demand back from 42 kilos only feeding in the parlour back to 35 there. Again, the final one there is one that comes in quite a bit from, say, people with young stock, beef farmers. It's, I need to save on silage. I'm trying to put silage into the milking cows or whatnot, and I just want to shove as much, say, concentrate or straight into the weanlings as possible, okay? And again, we're going to stick to that 50-50 limit. So where's the 50-50 limit there? It's about 4 kilos fresh weight of concentrate. So that'll cut the silage demand down to around 14 kilos for an approximately 330 to 350 kilo weaning. So I'll pass across to Elaine then, and Elaine can take you through maintaining milk production and fertility.
Thanks very much, Brian. So I'll be talking about just briefly on grass covers there in this slide. So I'll be focusing more on that small cohort that may be finishing the first rotation, since this webinar is all about stretching forage that we have available, rather than concentrating on that group that has loads of grass. It's just the issue is getting out to that grass and being able to graze it. So for those that are finishing and have been lucky enough to get out to grass over the last few weeks and are finishing up their first rotation, that they need to make sure that they don't drop below that average farm cover of 550 to 600, because that'll negatively impact on growth rates then in the subsequent weeks. And we don't want that leading into the breeding season and during that breeding season, because we don't want to restrict those cows in terms of intakes and grass availability. So ideally, if you are heading into the second rotation, that there should be a good cover on the first 3 paddocks of 1200 or more. And if there's not, that you try and extend what is left in that first rotation and extend it for another 5 to 7 days, depending on what's on those first few paddocks. So it's really important to get out there and even if you're not measuring grass, seeing what area is left over and allocate or split those into 5 different sections and allocate those then over the next 5 or 7 days, and using those supplements that Brian has out there previously, or any silage that is left, to extend that rotation as much as possible, just to make sure we don't run out of grass going into the breeding season. So in the next slide, just going to talk about what level of concentrates you need to be feeding if you are restricting grass intake. So here in this table, you can see the level of grass intakes from 10 to 16 and the level of milk that's being produced by cows and the level of concentrates that need to be fed to meet that requirement. So for example, if you're restricting it to 10 kgs of dry matter in terms of intake, you need to be feeding at least between 6 and 8 kgs of concentrate just to fill that gap, meet the dry matter intakes and energy requirements of the cow. So not only is it a challenge to get enough energy to support production while cows are housed, it can also be a challenge at grass, particularly if it's raining and we still have showers forecasted over the next couple of days. So just to be conscious of that when allocating grass, that you're allocating a greater area if that grass is available, and also filling that gap with good supplementation, because a cow can be restricted in terms of intakes because she just doesn't have the capacity to consume the massive volume of grass to meet her dry matter intake, particularly going into the breeding season. We don't want to restrict the cow or put her under any pressure, if at all possible. You might have been noticing in the recent few days maybe that intakes are increasing. You might be going through silage a lot quicker or the grass a lot quicker if you're out on it. And that's because cows are just starting to reach their peak intake. So typically a cow would be peaking at 18 kgs of dry matter. Those higher producing cows, they'd be pushing onto 23 kgs of dry matter at peak intakes. Just to keep that in mind when you're allocating grass or silage and concentrates. So if we move on to the next slide, I'll be talking kind of gearing up cows for the breeding season. So ideally cows should be on a rising plane of nutrition from calving until breeding, and particularly from now on, as the cow begins to really rely on her diet as to oppose her own body reserves. And a lot of cows may have used up a good bit of her body reserves, and there's none any or little left to pull on. So ideally cows should be at a body condition score of 3 to 3.2 when they're going into the breeding season. However, that may not be the case for all cows. So it's really important to get out there and assess the condition of the cows, and if they need to be gaining condition over the next few weeks before breeding starts. For example, if they need to gain at least a quarter of a body condition score, that means supplementing an extra 2 kgs of concentrate on top of the level of concentrates that are already being fed to be able to gain that quarter body condition score over the next four weeks. And this is a short-term investment. It may not feel like it, particularly if you're feeding high levels of concentrates over the last couple of weeks, but it is relative to the next lactation. So if it's really important just to keep on feeding those high levels of concentrates for the next few weeks, going into the breeding season. And even if you're going to grass, that those concentrates can be reduced, but just be mindful not to reduce this too much that it's going to restrict the cow and she'll be under pressure. Because we want to optimize or maximize the submission rates and conception rates as much as possible, because that'll incur cost then onto the next lactation if breeding is delayed or we miss a heat, which you've all heard the figures that Teagasc quotes of 250 per heat miss or €8 per day that the breeding is delayed per cow. So on the next slide, I'll touch on the maiden heifer. So they're also really important not to forget about them. So in majority of cases, heifers have remained indoors, and a proportion may not be reaching their target weights, and that can result in lower conception rates or even lower production in their first lactation if they don't manage to catch up in terms of their target weight between now and before they calve. So heifers should be 60% of the mature weight when it comes to breeding, so regardless of their age. So we're only, let's say, 3 or 4 weeks away from breeding. And at best, if they do remain indoors over the next few weeks, that the max you can achieve at best is 0.8 kgs of live weight gain. But this is only if they're being fed properly. So at a minimum, they need to be fed 2 kgs of concentrates, assuming they're on poor quality silage. If that's not being fed, they'll be on the lower range there at 0.5 kgs per day in terms of live weight gain. So it's really important to keep pushing those live weight gains, because there's still time to gain at least 20 kgs between now and the first week of May. And then if there is that opportunity to get out over the next few days, that those live weight gains can be pushed on further to a kg. So that gives a scope up to 30 kgs in terms of live weight gain to try and reach that 60% of mature weight as much as possible over the next few weeks. So that's all from me. I'll hand you back to Shane, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Elaine, and thanks, Brian. And thanks to all of you who have sent in questions for our speakers. There's a good number of questions in already, and we'll go through those now, but please keep sending in your questions. We'll hold the conversation here now on Q&A for a good 15 minutes, but we'll not keep you all night. But as long as there are good questions coming in, we'll keep them in, and some comments coming in as well. So just look, as a reminder, text in your questions to the Q&A function on Zoom. And if you'd like to, as I say, include your name and county, and we'll be able to call that out and get a picture of where you're coming from. So maybe the first question, it's from Charlie in Kilkenny. What steps can I take to ensure I give my cows and maiden heifers the best chance to go back and calf at first service? I think, Elaine, you covered it reasonably well there, but just what are the key messages around the best chances to get the cows and maiden heifers back in calf?
Yeah, so I suppose meeting the cows' requirements and ensuring they're in good body condition score, because the research has shown if they lose too much body condition score or they're below that 275, that conception rates are really significantly reduced. So making sure that you're continuously feeding those cows, meeting their requirements, and feeding those concentrates for the next few weeks to really push them on. And the same goes with heifers. So really pushing that concentrates if they're still indoors, feeding up to 3 and 3.5, depending on your silage quality. And if at all possible, get them out to grass in the next few days if the ground conditions allow, to really push them on to gain those weights.
Very good. Another technical one, Brian, maybe for yourself. If zero grazed grass is contaminated with clay from bad weather conditions, which is going to be likely at the minute, how dangerous is this to milking cows?
Yeah, it's a good point. And it's something we're seeing a lot of, or we're going to see a lot of, because people have a lot of, say, grass and outblocks that they're going to try bring home to the milking herd there. It's not advisable. Clay goes into a cow's stomach, stones, it can't get back out of it. It's not ideal at all, and it should be tried to be avoided, because you will eventually lead and potentially lead to, say, clostridial issues down the line as well. So it's definitely to be avoided.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough. Question in from Laura. Good evening all. Will the 3-cent support be adjusted to reflect solids, or is it a flat payment? Maybe one for yourself, Sean. And there was another question in there as well on the €30 per ton. Do all suppliers qualify? And then the piece on the €30 rebate, is that also paid on straights?
Okay, thank you, Shane, and thank you, Laura, for the first question there. So that the 3 cent per litre is plus constituents. So yes, it will be plus solids, Laura, on the 3 cent per litre. The €30 a ton, yes, it's open to all of our suppliers that are buying feed directly from ourselves, Shane. It's on concentrates at the moment as opposed to straights. And given the nature of those, and technically your crew will probably answer this better than I would, Shane, it was adjudicated that was better where to spend our money, and it presented value for money for farmers by doing that. So that's the response, Shane.
And Brian, on that piece, in terms of the concentrate feeds, that's where the most value is at the minute.
Yeah, as well as that, we've probably seen a couple of people bring up inquiries there recently in the last couple of weeks to say, well, how much can I push the concentrate, or how much can I push the straights, and can I push the nut or the concentrate in the parlour right down? And it's important to remember at these times, generally, the concentrate nut is the only source of minerals and CalMag. So that's very much why we wouldn't want to go too severe on too much straights and too little concentrate.
Yeah, no, fair play. This is a question in from Niamh Keane, one of our milk supply managers, and it's on behalf of her suppliers in Wicklow and Wexford. Elaine, what would be your advice for winter milk suppliers in order to maintain milk yields and solids where grazing has not been possible? So they're getting past their peak and towards the end of their lactation. So what's the advice for those?
I suppose it would be similar to the spring situation, the third situation. So in order to hold milk yield, it's where energy is lacking that the milk yields will drop more significantly than what they should be. So again, kind of keeping at least 4 kgs, depending on your quality of your silage that's left, but they tend to have a bit of a higher quality silage in winter herds, but at least 4 kgs of concentrates, just to keep those milk yields high and ensure there's enough energy in the diet.
Important to keep them fed, absolutely. Question, I'm not sure, Brian or Sean, if you want to take it, but can fertilizer that's already been purchased on account be moved into the credit scheme? Sean, maybe one for
Okay,
yourself.
I'll pick up on that. So I'm not quite sure who that came in from, Shane, but what I would
Sorry, it was from
suggest
Thomas. Yeah, Thomas. Yeah.
Thomas, well, Thomas, thank you for the question, Thomas. What I'd suggest that you might do there is to contact your business manager directly if you want to get a chance to do that tomorrow, and to have that discussion. We would be favourably disposed towards that, because that is what the credit scheme was set up to do, to help people buy fertiliser at the early part of the year and not have to pay for it until the later months. So I'd suggest that Thomas might, Shane, directly contact his business manager as soon as he gets a moment, and we'll accommodate a conversation on that.
That's great. Question from Kieran Murphy. What about feeding maize as an option? Brian, one for you.
Does it say maize meal or maize silage?
Just says maize, so I presume.
Right, we'll assume maize meal. Maize meal is another excellent option, a very safe feed as well, because there's a lot of bypass starch in it, so you're going to avoid, say, any massive digestive upsets. So again, it's right up there with soya hulls or beet pulp as one of those really safe feeds there, and we're seeing quite a bit of it being fed there at the moment. And on, as I say, a pound per pound basis, one of the highest energy feeds that you can currently get at the moment.
And just in case it was maize silage, Brian, and there's
maize silage again, absolutely perfect. No problem at all. A lot of the same qualities as maize meal. What we do see when maize silage is introduced into diets, and we have seen quite a bit of it, where farmers were just feeding, say, grass silage, and they introduced maize silage along with it. The cow's overall intake actually jumped. It's more palatable. It's just something different, and cows are you see in a pretty immediate response in the milk tank and milk proteins.
Yep, yeah. Elaine, question for you. What if heifers are not hitting their target weights but are bulling now? Will that impact on conception rates?
So if they're slightly behind in terms of target weights, but you're seeing them bulling strongly, that's an indicator that they are fertile, and so if you do see strong bulling from heifers, I would put them into the bull or put them to AI, because it is an indicator that they are fertile.
And I suppose then the converse of that question that's come in, and they didn't give the name, but if they're not seeing them bulling and potentially a little bit behind, it's really about rising that planning nutrition then, Elaine, is it?
Yeah, exactly. So there is still like 2, 3, 4 weeks, depending on when you start your breeding season, to really push intakes and make sure that they're getting the right nutrition. So again, if they're inside, make sure that they're being supplemented with concentrates between 2 and up to 3.5, just to make sure that they get that extra push to reach those growth rates. And if there is an option to go out to grass, and that'll push them on another bit. And you'd be surprised, even when you, during the breeding season, being outside and just getting a bit of sun, you tend to see more cows bulling. That's also you'd see those with heifers as well.
Yeah, another question, Brian, maybe for yourself, related to breeding and potentially delaying the breeding. So it's a question from John Joe Murphy, our milk supply manager in North Kilkenny. Would you recommend delaying the breeding season by a week, Brian?
No, well, we wouldn't at all, because ultimately, like, if you're delaying it a week, there's going to be massive knock-on effects for years to come. I'd more so go back to Elaine's point and say, address any energy deficit and continue on your normal breeding pattern.
Yeah, 100%. We've got a question in there from Roy. When do farmers need to drop the protein percentage of concentrates to the 15% to comply with summer low crude protein requirements? Brian, that's 15th of April, isn't it?
Yeah, it's the 15th of April. And so what it is for any farmer that is over 130 kilograms of organic nitrogen, they have to feed, say, a 15% concentrate, a maximum 15% concentrate from the 15th of April. There's a couple of side notes with this. That is for cows and livestock that are at grass at full time. Now, currently, as it stands, there's not a lot of cows that are on that at the minute. So sorry there now. So we do have now we're back. And so there's not a lot of cows that are on a full grass diet at the moment. And So if it only needs to happen when they go on to say a full grass diet, but it is still advisable to contact your advisor, whoever's doing your nitrates or derogation plan, and to specify with them. And it is often requested that if someone is going to feed beyond that, that they get say a letter from them to do that, and that's from your advisor that's doing your nitrates or your derogation plan.
Right, Brian. A little bit related, but look, we'll throw it out anyway because it's slightly different. Elaine, one for you. Is 50-50 maize silage and grass silage a safe feeding mix for indoors? Looking to stretch the last of the pit silage, feeding 8 kilos in parlour on no grass. That's from Ed. Elaine, just on that one.
Yeah, definitely 50-50 silage and maize silage is definitely safe. It's an ideal diet to really push on milk yields and proteins, as Brian said there earlier. And maize is a very, very safe forage to include. So it still has that fiber in it, but it also has that bit of starch. And feeding 8 kgs is still safe because you have that fiber level from the silage as well.
I think a lot of people would be happy to have a combination of maize and grass silage available.
Exactly.
So fair play, Ed. Brian, one for you. Can I feed soya hulls to yearlings? This person won't get to grass for at least 10 days.
Yeah, no problem at all. But just remember, say that soya hulls are 11% protein. So just make sure that they are being adequately fed for protein. Maybe a combination of something like a 16% wean and build. That's going to have a high level of minerals as well. Because if you go all soya hulls, be ultimately no problem with it, but you don't want to leave any of your weaned short, specifically at this time of the year, on protein or minerals.
Okay. John, Lane, one for you. John in Cork. He's already feeding 8 kilos of concentrates, and he says he needs to feed the 2 kilos more that you'd called out on top of that to gain body condition. Obviously, he's got thin cows. Will that not sicken them? So he's talking there about 8 plus a further 10 kilos. Does he need to feed midday?
Yeah, so that goes back to what Brian was saying earlier, to kind of split that, maybe reduce your parlour feeding and be able, if at all possible, to do that in a midday feed to kind of spread out that concentrate level and reduce that burden then when they have that high level of concentrates fed in the parlour. So yeah, midday feed would be the solution there.
Yeah. So John Dalton, why are there such spikes and dips with milk urea, and will this affect fertility? Brian, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, so we're seeing as cows get out to grass, and say grass is high in protein when we can get out to it, we are seeing certain spikes in milk ureas. We're not seeing anything crazy at the moment. It's generally staying under 30-35. So we have been monitoring, we have seen it, but at the moment it's very, very manageable. And for a lot of those cases, like look, access to long fiber is going to do a lot there as well.
Okay. Laura has another question. I'll throw it back to you, Elaine. Laura Forbes, another question. They're a bit linked. When using additional concentrates to increase body condition, can you just comment on the recommended protein content of the concentrates? And then what protein can I feed my cows, bearing in mind the new regulations of proteins, and this person, Jared Cook, needs to order it tomorrow?
So it really depends whether you're indoors or outdoors, so or on off grazing. So if you're fully indoors and you know you're going to stay in for another while, then 18% nut, that's just to keep milk production, but also build body condition and build muscle back up. If you're on off grazing, then ideally a 16% nut, and if you know you're going to do that for another while. But if you're going out to grass, then below that 15%, as we mentioned earlier. So protein percentage, it depends whether it's cows or maiden heifers, either as well, but cows, it just depends on the diet. So you're getting enough protein from the grass. And then maiden heifers, you want to be at the 15, between 14 and 16%.
Okay,
I might come in
guys,
there even, Shane, on
of course,
that.
Brian, yeah.
Like just from a nutritional point of view, what we would often do when that query comes in, we like ask where our milk ureas. You know, if we're seeing very high milk ureas, then yes, you do need to reduce the overall protein in the concentrate. But it's probably not as simple, like Elaine has said, as just saying feed this protein on this day. It's very much as to say looking at your milk solids, looking at your milk urea, and making a kind of an informed decision and giving the cow what she exactly requires.
Yeah, 100%. Brian, one for you. If I can't get heifers out until breeding, will that upset them? So basically, they're not going to get out for another while by the looks of it.
Yeah, again, it comes back to what Elaine said. Just look, ideally, you'd love to have them out, but once they're being nutritionally well looked after, if they're inside, they're going to need some level of concentrate or high energy just to get them cycling and get everything working properly. So no, I wouldn't. Once you're fully nutritionally balanced, you can work away.
I might just come in there too. It's just when not to let out those heifers, maybe if at all possible, if there's forage available, of course, or silage, that at that week, if you let them out maybe a few days just before breeding, it might upset them a small bit. So just maybe if at all possible, just keep the diet as consistent as possible. But again, if you're running out of silage and that's your only option, then it's better to get them out and actually get the grass into them.
Guys, I have two more questions. They're technical ones in nutrition, but I've also a couple of comments. And thanks to Eamon Comiskey, Regional Milk Supply Manager, just asked me to inform everyone that the weather-related support payment of 3 cents per litre will be paid in the final milk payment this month. And Owen O'Riordan, also Milk Supply Manager, Regional Milk Supply Manager, was asked to call out the process for applying for the advance payment. So I'm just going to read it out here. We're trying to keep the application process as simple as possible, and we're conscious of the pressure certain suppliers are under. We expect to have the application or contract, if you want to call it that, out in late next week, and the first payments into trading accounts by the first week of May. So any questions, reach out to the local Tirlán representatives. So thanks for that. And just the last couple of questions, Elaine, one for you. I've 70% of the farm grazed with very little regrowth. The remaining 30% won't be able to be grazed for at least 10 days with all the rain that's been. What is the advice here? So 70% grazed, 30% won't be grazed for another good while.
Yeah, so it kind of goes back to what Brian was saying earlier, that if you don't have that option to go out grazing, and if you have silage available, you'll have to go back indoors and feed silage. And if you don't have silage, I suppose the next best thing is then try and source forage to be able to balance that then with your concentrate or your straights or whatever is available.
Yeah, excellent. And Brian, last question. I'm feeding soya hulls through a diet feeder. Can I cut back the nut in the parlour to keep down the cost?
Again, I think we touched on it earlier on, and it's coming in quite a bit there, because obviously, say some of the straights there are going to be at a cheaper price point. But you have to remember, say soya hulls, it's lower protein. It doesn't have any minerals or very little. So as you approach breeding season, your mineral content and feeding minerals adequately is going to be very, very important at this stage. So and obviously it's the only source of CalMag as well. So again, soya hulls, excellent feed, along with, say, the same as maize or beet pulp. But just be very, very conscious that the nut is the only place you're getting, say, your CalMag, your minerals, and so on, so forth.
Brian, Elaine, excellent technical updates and information there, and thank you very much for that. Sean and John, thank you very much for your contributions and answering questions. John, I'll come back to you just in 1 second, just to close out with a closing address, but just like to thank everyone for all your questions, and anyone who has asked a question that we didn't get to, will respond individually, and we have, I suppose, your name and details now through the system. Look, every farm is different, and bespoke solutions are needed for individual farms, and look, get in touch with your local Tirlán representative who'll be able to work through the solutions. Hope everybody's got some good management tips and will be able to apply them in the coming breeding season. Just to thank everyone, our speakers, Elaine, Brian, Sean and John, and to Tom, Caroline and Rob, who are working in the background to deliver the webinar. And now I'll hand over to Tirlán Chairperson John Murphy to close out the webinar. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Shane. And look, I hope everybody found this evening's webinar informative. I certainly did, and look, really good practical advice there from Elaine and Brian. So that's appreciated, and it's great to have that level of talent in our co-op. On the sports, again, as you've just said there, Shane, we're going to make this as quick and speedily and as easy to draw down as possible. So I would encourage all our members to draw down all these supports. That's what they're for. I suppose, looking as farmers, we're optimists. I suppose we need to be. We're optimists by nature. But, you know, it's important we remain positive. This bad weather phase will pass, and it is passing. The things look much better over the next 10 days. And hopefully in 2 weeks, so we'll have all our stock out and lots of crops in the ground. And it's early enough in the year still that we have a good, decent year ahead. So again, thanks to all our speakers. Thanks to you for our questions. As we go into a really busy period now over the next couple of weeks, you know, I'd urge you, our members, to farm safely and take care of each other. So thank you very much, and thanks for joining us.